back again, and I thought I'd make another extended video on introverted feeling, or FI. And I'll talk about FI when it's blocked with NE, and I guess I could kind of talk about how MBTI, or a Jungian typology that's not socionics, would describe NE with FI, and how socionics would describe NE-FI. They're pretty similar because extrovert intuition is more of a seamless crossover between systems, and the last video I was talking about how gammas use FI specifically, which is, does this thing have value for me? Is it valuable or is it not? Is it worth the investment or is it not? It's very black and white in that regard. Now, it's black and white to the types that have lower intuition, that are gammas, so an ESI. And what else? I guess you could say SEE, because they have two-dimensional NE. ESIs have one-dimensional NE. So with the gamma NTs, they have more of more complexity and nuance to them than just is this thing valuable, or is this person valuable or not. And that kind of gets into the functions as well, because if you have flexible FI, so contact FI, and socionics, then you're not as stubborn with that information. You have more of a adaptable quality in regards to that information. So for example, you don't need someone to give you clear signals of how close you are with them or not. People that have flexible FI tend to be more, especially when it's lower, tend to be more unaware of where they stand with other people, and so it requires the other person to tell them whether or not they're close, or whether or not they like them or not. And that's again a truism of people that have flexible and weak intuition. It's kind of results to indifference. Now obviously, if it's 15 people and what, there's no way that's accurate. Is that real? Are there really 15 people watching? What? But when it's valued and it's flexible weak, that's basically suggestive. And for the LIE specifically, they're seeking meaningful relationships, usually with one other person. They're not necessarily looking for a group to affiliate with that is kind of their tribe. Gamma types are very anti-tribal, and so the LIE wants to find a partner or someone that they can share psychological nearness with. That could be a strong friendship, that could be a intimate relationship, romantic relationship, whatever the word is. But they actually care about this information, and that's because they value FI. Whereas the FI polars, or basically, well, the problem with FI polar is that it wouldn't be actually flexible. It would be stubborn. And so that's kind of the contrast you can see, for example, between the LIE and the ILE. The ILE is not really picking up on FI information, and they need someone else to provide them that information. And when it's provided for them, they still don't really metabolize it well. They don't. It's not on their radar. So that was kind of what I was talking about in the previous video, but now I guess I can kind of talk about the relationship between NE and FI. And it's a pretty, there's some similarities obviously between, let's say, an ESI, so FISE, and an EII, FINE, and that they both lead with FI, and that's stubborn, and that's an ego function, and that's what they're providing with society, and they both have a sophisticated understanding of what attracts them to certain people or what repulses them from people, and how to create that nearness or that distance if need be. But they have two completely different ways of, first of all, like philosophically looking how they view human nature. I've noticed this is a huge difference. ESIs and gammas in general have more of a pessimistic view of human nature. So in essence, they believe that you basically are what you do, and your actions reveal what you are at a fundamental level. And there's not much changing that, especially for an ESI, right? That would be, that philosophy would be stronger in an ESI. Like, what you did was reprehensible. You're just this kind of person because these kinds of people do X, Y, and Z. You did X, Y, and Z, therefore you're that kind of person. And they will take a very strong stance on someone's moral ineptness. And they'll take a very strong stance on kinds of people that they like or dislike and why they like or dislike them. And it's really interesting. This is a side tangent. How FI is not rational in the logical sense. Like, and being a logical type myself, it baffles me that if you ask an FI lead, really in any system, why they don't like a certain person, the best that they can do is give you actions that the person did, which in one sense, you can observe that and you can judge it for what it is. But other times they have reactions towards people that aren't rational, that they're not coming from any rational grounds. And it's not because of, they can't give you reasons, like particular reasons as of why they don't like this person, and they'll make kind of immediate judgments about people, and that's just the way that they work. And a lot of times you'll hear them say that. Like, you'll ask them, well, did they do something that made you, sometimes they'll be, no, not particularly. And it'll actually even often be before the person has done anything, right? You know, if they're meeting someone for the first time, they can have a gut reaction to whether they like that person or not, and it's just almost instinctual and reactive. And they'll often say, these are anecdotes, but take them for what they're worth. They'll often say, well, there's just this thing about them that I don't like. And then if you're trying to be rational, you would ask a question like, okay, well, what is the thing? Like, you identify that there is a thing that makes them reprehensible and you don't like them. So can you describe the thing? And they can't describe the thing because they have just an immediate reaction to this object in front of them, this thing that just doesn't align with them in some fashion. And that's a very objective way to look at it, in the sense of, I mean, that's kind of how I look at it, that you don't really, you know, you have all these puzzle pieces that make up the puzzle, and some pieces aren't meant to be fit together. It doesn't mean that you can't find common ground and have a conversation, because then after that, the dynamic of your relationship will obviously change, and then you'll just have to reorient in some fashion if you want to be productive. Sometimes there's no purpose to that. You're talking to someone at work and you're speaking a completely different language, or they're next to you in the cubicle. You have no reason necessarily to befriend them per se, and that's fine. But if you're trying to solve a task, it just makes sense to figure out what language they speak, so that you can solve problems more effectively. That just makes sense. Like, I just need you to be able to understand what's coming from my brain through my mouth to your brain, and vice versa. If we can figure out that schema, then we'll be fine. It's all good. But gammas, and specifically because we're talking about FI, it makes sense to talk about it when it's valued, strong ego. This is what they're pushing out into the world. So ESIs, now the irony about ESIs is that they have more of this is also somewhat anecdotal, and I think this can derive from the system as well. I don't think it's just merely an anecdote, but they have like a very fixed door of who they let into their circle, and if you're not in the circle, then the grace allotted to you is limited. So if you make a mistake, because they've already selected people they care about and that they're investing their time in, you're just kind of noise in the background to some degree. It doesn't, and I'm not like badgering ESIs for this. It's just, first of all, I think it's fascinating, and I can see the need for it, I guess sociologically, whatever you want to call it. But if you make a mistake and you're on the outskirts of their circle, then you got to deal with the pain. They're far less forgiving if you're outside the circle, because the psychological mentality underneath that is you don't have value to me personally. It doesn't mean that you aren't valuable. It just means in my life, I haven't selected you to be worth my time, my energy, my resources. That is legitimately how they think, like 100%. Now, obviously, that's the neutral kind of understanding of specifically ESIs, and that varies depending on the type within the Gamma Quadra, obviously. But collectively, and generally speaking, that's pretty common with gamma types, just period. So they have that naturally pessimistic view of human nature, and which kind of keeps them guarded to a degree, which kind of reinforces them to be selective, because if most people are out to hurt you in some sense, or will take advantage of you in some sense, then it would make sense to reinforce your boundaries or reinforce the people who you let into your inner circle. That's just a very, very stereotypical gamma way of thinking. And they're not looking at potentialities within people. They're not seeing how people could change over time, or seeing some goodness or latent goodness within them in some sense, and that can be actualized at any time. If the conditions are right, that could happen. To an ESI, like those conditions aren't happening, and therefore that outcome will not occur, and therefore you're just you are what you appear to me in the moment, and that's just all she wrote. Whereas an EII has far more they still have that kind of like relational gatekeeping thing going on, but they're far more likely to avoid you and work around you because they're world accepting types, the NESI types. They value potential and peace. Do a little alliteration action. They value those two things, and so they would rather just not acknowledge you, and that they won't be mean to you, but they'll be definitely indifferent and kind of like, also, you're not worth my time either, but I'm not going to explicitly state that. I will just reveal that through passive actions. That's kind of an oxymoron, but through passivity. I'm just going to work around you as an obstacle, which would be SI, working around things, basically. But yeah, I'm trying to think. Yeah, and obviously EIIs, the FINE types, have more of a naturally patient and gracious demeanor, where they recognize that there are so many factors that lead to a person making a poor decision. And in theory, a person could make tons of horrible decisions, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they have some stamp on their identity, like they're a bad person per se. Kind of in my mind, the delta NFs kind of remind me of the saying that you're a product of your environment, right? And there is something good to be mined and to be actualized, whatever that means. It just needs some work, right? If we have enough conversations and I can work with you, potentially you could change, right? So they have more of a forgiving demeanor, but they also have more of a kind of enabling personality as well. Gammas, especially ESIs, if they care for you, they will fight for you. Like they will tell you things you don't want to hear. They will confront you and call you out. That is stereotypical ESIs. EIIs don't really do that. They will give you a recommendation of how you can change your ways of thinking, and they'll explore that with you, but they're not going to give you a directive. That's not in their personality to do that. Do this, don't do that. That is definitely much more of an ESI thing. It just has obviously more present SE, kind of drawing lines in the sand. And so EIs have much more of a patient and enduring way of dealing with difficult people in their lives, and more of a working around the issue rather than pinpointing the exact thing that is causing the problem. And so, like, for example, if you pissed off an EII, they would likely ask you why you were angry, or looking at other factors, like, did you have a bad day, was work bad? Or they wouldn't just flat out react to being disrespected and put you in your place, basically, and stand up to you. They would try to see things from different points of view that led up to your emotional outburst, because it's safer, and there's always something that they potentially didn't consider that led to the way you reacted, right? They're like, something could have happened to them today, and I want to be open to that, because I don't want to make a fixed judgment about what they did. And through those themes, you can obviously see, again, NESI, you can see some TE, which deals with just objective facts and kind of different circumstances, facts changing over time, and different events. And they have much more of a adaptable relationship to human nature. I've heard, I mean, some of them can still think that people fundamentally are bad in some sense, but the way they engage with people shows that they're more they are aware of that, but they want to see all the different factors with any given person that led to that way of being. They have more perspective in a sense. ESIs definitely do not have that quality. I mean, they can have that quality, but it takes longer for that to. It takes more right actions, or actions that prove that you're about what you say, that you're demonstrating integrity practically and consistently and clearly and externally. And then once they can see that over and over and over again, then potentially you can change their mind about how they feel about you, right? It's not nearly that hard for an EII to change their opinions about people. I mean, it is to a degree, just FI in general. Once you have that judgment, it's hard to really change it. But also, if EIIs know they have to deal with you long term, it's just more comfortable for them to change their mind about you, because they don't want to deal with you. They don't want to deal with the discomfort in the moment every time they see you. So they'll just be like, all right, no, I'm good, they're fine. You're just like, wait, I thought you couldn't stand them. What happened? They're like, well, I was being harsh. You're like, well, maybe. Or you just, like, you were justified in it, and you're just basically giving up on that feeling, whatever. ESIs can be more efficient in the sense that if you were direct with them and quick to the point, then on those merits, the relationship could be restored on those merits. But other times they don't want to have anything to do with you, and they won't hide it. They can't really hide it because they ignore FE. So if they don't like you, they're not going to dynamically engage with the emotional atmosphere in a way that's lighthearted and appears to be, we're all on good terms. They do have that SEI as their quasi-identical, so they have 4-dimensional SI and 3-dimensional FE. You can see that come out from time to time, but nah, bro. If they don't mess with you, then that's just all she wrote, and they're not trying to like smile and laugh with you. It's just not what they do. They're like, I don't care. Like, you can laugh, but I don't. That's not changing what I think. Which is kind of funny. It's just like, it's funny to me because people and personality in general is like, we're all like cartoon characters. That's kind of how I view personality. It's like we all have weird quirks, and we're just like more animated and physical cartoon figures. And seeing people react in certain ways is also equally cartoonish. I find that it's just funny. And I feel like I'm probably one of the most cartoonish people I know. And I participate in it. The whole cartoon world. Man, we're just interesting creatures. But Forgot what I was saying. Yeah, so and there's other ways that you can kind of tell the difference. I mean, the biggest one is, recognizing they have the same lead, but they have opposite polar functions or polar information elements. And that's pretty clear. That's clear as day. ESIs really do enjoy their comforts, and they can meet those needs without thinking. But you can start to see the difference between them and SEIs quickly, in that they're gonna draw a line in the sand. Come on, bro. And it's gonna be clear, and they're not trying to keep peace at all. SEIs, you have to push them to get to that point, and then it comes out, but it's not for very long, and it still has a light undertone, but not with ESIs. And so what else? Another interesting thing is that their relationship to TE is different. Like, I've noticed that ESIs, it almost seems that ESIs care more about being knowledgeable. Why am I going this way? I'm actually stupid. ESIs really need to be seen as knowledgeable and competent, and it seems more egoic in a sense than with EIIs. Like, EIIs kind of have more of a, and I think it's just the presence of any that makes it seem a little more accommodating. Like, they're not as like, if an EII doesn't know how to do something, or they don't know something about something, whatever, they might privately try to figure it out and then come out of the woodworks like, oh man, I know how to do this, great. And they still don't want you to, like, they would like to be able to integrate TE on their own, but they know they can't. And so they're gonna have to seek some form of contact with someone that has that information and that can help them there. ESIs, and this is kind of anecdotal too, but again, I still think that this derives from the theory, but how do I describe it? In some sense, ESIs seem a little bit more confident, and kind of like they will, and it could be a dynamic with the creative and the suggestive. I don't even know if there is a legitimate dynamic, but this makes sense. An ESI will push for answers. They will sit on you until you show them how to do something, or you give them the information they want. Not saying they can't research things on their own and can't learn. That still can fit within the one-dimensional realm. But they get more frustrated if things aren't made clear in the world of TE. Whereas an EII would just kind of give up and just would kind of be like, all right, well, it would be more of a struggle to get factual information about how to do their job, for example, or if they're at work and they're trying to figure out how some system runs, like they're trying to work on a computer to do their job, and there's some information that they're missing, and because they're conflict averse, they really not want to even ask a question. They would hope the question would come to them naturally, whether that's kind of passively vocalizing that they don't know what they're doing, so that someone recognizes that and then asks them if they need help, for example. And they're also they seem to have more of a humility around being helped. ESIs probably would be a little bit more stubborn in that regard, and would want to take more of the onus on themselves to work at something and work at it until they figure it out. That's at least, why can't I see the comments? I don't even know if I have any, but I can't see at all. Oh well. And again, I think you could make a case for that systematically, but these are definitely some anecdotes I've seen, and I don't know what it is, but it does seem to be a trend. It might even just be how confident each type is once they have the information and when they're communicating it. Like when they're sharing the information they're learning, it's possible that ESIs have a naturally just more vibrato in sharing that information to a certain degree, whereas EIs don't have as much, like, this is what I've learned, this is the fact, and they just, like, if you were to challenge them on it, they would probably they wouldn't really potentially feel the need to defend themselves. ESIs, I don't know, it's kind of hard to describe. These are just some little things that I've noticed, but, and again, that's not saying that both types aren't competent or can't learn things. I mean, that would be a crazy reduction. I mean, I've met many TE suggestives, for example, that are extremely smart and well-versed in many different areas, and are great at their job, and, whatever the case is. So some people would be like, well, that means, it sounds like you're saying you think they're dumb. It's like, nope. Doesn't have to mean that, and that's not true. So, yeah. What else? And yeah, I mean, EIs just have more of a good nature use of FI. Kind of like, people grew up, it happens, learn from your mistakes. It's kind of the Delta motif. And you adapt, you learn, you take in more information, you surround yourself by people who are knowledgeable and wise and responsible, and you just listen to them and kind of incorporate that in your own life. Delta types are like the, and this is getting more into the, when I like comparing Delta STs to Gamma NTs or even Gamma SFs. Like, both can be competitive and have a sense of like, I want to be successful, right? They both can relate to that. Anyone can relate to it, but I'm saying that to prove a point. Whereas the Gamma NTs will try to strategically align their goals in order to periodically achieve those goals they've set out for themselves. And have more of a systematic approach to that. Whereas Delta STs, in contrast, equally want to be successful, but they want to be skillful. They want to be competent in the here and now. And in order to do that, it requires you to be adaptable. It requires you to be flexible and to not be afraid of making a mistake. And that's the one thing I've noticed with Delta types, that they are very forgiving of mistakes in general, but like with the ST types, like mechanical mistakes, like I put this together wrong, or this room doesn't, or the system at work isn't running smoothly and it's not very effective or efficient. Like, they're not as harsh in their judgments about those kind of situations, because they realize that yeah, okay, this isn't running smoothly. What can we adapt and change and modify and update to the system to make it run more effective? And if I keep doing that over time, the system's going to get screwed in tighter and tighter to where it's as tight as it can be. And if something comes up with it in the Delta mind, it's like, okay, then we deal with it and we figure out a solution. They're very solution oriented and don't see mechanical flaws or failures as something that's going to prevent them from making something better. Like they're not like that. Um, and yeah, I think that's it. Okay, peace.